hope you can see the PowerPoint presentation okay.
We can.
That's super. I'm often asked how to pronounce this tongue twister. It's Fldigi, and the FL stands for Fastlight, which happens to be the user interface library that I base all of my software on. It's been around for about 30 years, and it was principally for use in the Unix world, but eventually found its way over into Linux, Windows, and OS X. So the program we're going to talk about first is Fldigi. But you should know that this is an entire application suite. Consists of the digital modem program, Fldigi, an automated repeat request system that's called FLARQ, a message management and transfer software, Flmsg, amateur multicast protocol, FLAMP, transceiver control, FLRig, file encapsulation, in other words, being able to compress a file suitably for transmission over the radio, FLRAP, a separate program that is in support of the WinKeyer interface, FLNano, which supports both Nano, which is a keyer interface that I developed, and also MORTTY, a commercially available CW and RTTY interface. Includes a logbook server, FLlog, which can service multiple running Fldgis, FLW keys, the whole list. And all of this, by the way, all of this works over local and wide area networks. A net management program called FLNet. I wrote originally for a group called the RoosterNet, meets on Sunday mornings. FD server, a field day server, which is not actually written in using the Fastlight program, so I didn't include the FL on that, but it's a TCP LP scripting program, but it runs very well, and it supports multiple field day clients over local and wide area nets. And finally, something called LinSim, which is a takeoff from a program called PathSim, which you may or may not be familiar with, and it's a propagation simulator. The ones that have the asterisks are collectively referred to as narrowband emergency communication system or messaging system. All of these programs run on Linux, Unix, Windows, that is Windows 7 through 10, OS X, both the i86 and x86 series, which means everything from about OS X 10.7 up to the current. And it will also run on desktops, notebooks, netbooks, and tablets. Not a, it had to be a Windows tablet. So why do you want to use digital modes? First of all, they operate under very low power. It's like operating a QRP system. You never need more than 25 watts. It'll succeed even where CW fails. Some of the modes will work below 16 dB, minus 16 dB signal to noise ratio. That means you cannot hear it and you cannot see it on the screen, but it will decode. There are many modes. In fact, Fldigi has about 180 different modes if you include all of the submodes. That's a big selection. But you use only a very few of them, and you use them very much dependent upon the operating conditions and the intended use. And it's fun. It adds another dimension to ham radio. I've been in ham radio since 1957, and I've been a CW operator all those years. But I've got 2 hearing aids in, and they don't help very much to copy code. So this is a way for me to still have fun with amateur radio. And finally, it can provide error-free data transfers through redundancy and repetitive transmissions. Very good for the emergency communications arena. So let's talk about some of the more common digital modes. PSK31 is perfect and for keyboard to keyboard casual comms. It's probably something most of you have already used or been familiar with. Here's one that I invented called Thor 16. You know, Thor is the Norse god of thunder, and Thor will work right through electrical storms. It's got very heavy forward error correcting. It's multi-tone. It's very easy to tune. In fact, you can be detuned from the center of the signal by as much as 50%, which means on Thor 16, that's a 200 hertz tuning error. It provides excellent signal to noise performance, and it includes fax image transfers as an integral part of the mode. Olivia, which a lot of people use because it's so robust, 8,500 and 16,500. They're very, very slow for keyboard comms, but they will work almost where nothing else will. Contestia is like Olivia. It's very similar in its characteristics. In fact, it'll sound very similar if you hear it on the radio, but it's uppercase only. It has a reduced forward error correcting system, so it's about twice as fast as Olivia. If you've got good comms on Olivia, my suggestion is drop back to Contestia and enjoy a little bit faster communications. And it's great at marginal signal to noise ratios. MT63 is a very wideband mode. It's multi PSK signals, as many as 64 at one time. It has moderate speed and it's used primarily, to my knowledge, by the Modes system. Of course, we have our own legacy digital mode, RTTY. Certainly not good for QRP. It's got very poor signal to noise performance, but it's probably the best contesting mode around because you can get such fast turnaround on keyboard to keyboard. That means you have to run high power. The hardware required to run Fldigi is pretty simple. You only need a transceiver and a sound card interface. I owned the 7200 several years ago, so this was a photo of that. My current transceiver suite is a 7100 ICOM and a Yaesu FT991A. So the sound card interface is going to connect you from the radio to the computer. It should provide RF isolation and ground loop isolation, that is transformer coupling. And it should be able to allow you to automate push to talk when you transmit. So I've shown here a couple of things, various interface units, including the low-level Chinese ripoff sound cards, thumb drives, US Navigator, the Rig Blaster, and the very common and ubiquitous Signal Link, both of which are in my closet. And if you have a more modern transceiver, such as the FT991A or the ICOM series, they have a USB port, which provides not only cat control, but also USB audio, both receive and transmit. My preference is to use these when you can afford it. If you install Fldigi for the first time and start it up on any one of the operating systems, you're going to go through a new install wizard. I'm going to go through this very quickly because many of these configuration items we'll go through in more detail later. So it's going to take you through operator, sound card, transceiver control, basically. So the operator station information is going to be entered in a form like this. The sound card devices, how you're going to control the rig, whether it's through an interface to FLRig or using the Fldigi built-in RigCAT interface, or the library form hamlib, which is a third-party library, and it's also open source, just as Fldigi is. You also have some other items to take care of, which has to do with navtex primarily, and this item we'll just go over real quickly, but you basically want to leave it the way it is unless you find that something's changed on you. So configuring the operator is very simple. You open up the configuration page and bring up operator station. You want to enter every one of these things because they're going to be used later on in expanding macros. And when you're doing digital communications, it's very nice to be able to use macros to ease the keyboard activity you have, and you can create nice canned responses to the opening part of the QSO or even a closing part of the QSO. Very critical to Fldigi is the audio setup. It's probably the thing that most people have difficulty with to begin with. It's not that difficult if you understand a little bit about how audio is handled by the computer and the input-output devices. So first thing, you have to make sure whatever device you're using, that you have the proper driver installed for that particular operating system. I'm on a Macintosh computer right now. It's a small mini Mac. And if I want to use either my ICOM 7100 or my Yaesu FT991A, I do have to have specific drivers installed both for the serial and for the audio input-output. So on Windows and Apple, you're going to select port audio. And that's the first checkbox here. It's going to be the one that most people will use. If you're on a Linux or Unix system, you'll have more choices, including something called Pulse Audio, which is a streaming audio stream to an audio server that's present on most Linux and Unix systems. So this is my setup specifically for my ICOM 7100 on this Apple computer. So you should understand a little bit about the audio pathways and what happens with various Fldigi controls. First of all, and most importantly, Fldigi has no audio control over the mixer. All mixer audio controls are done external to Fldigi. So that on Windows, that would be the Windows mixer control. So when I refer to the external gain, that's basically the external OS mixer control. That signal goes directly to the signal processing code in Fldigi. But there's a lot of things that the user needs to be able to see to function well using digital signals. First of all, you want to know a little bit about what the input signal level is. And Fldigi does have a VU type meter that's available to be seen both on the audio configuration panel and on the front panel of Fldigi. Fldigi has a small indicator down here which will flash either green, yellow, black, or red to indicate kind of where your input signal is at. If it's in the green, it's usually in a good spot. But green is not good for some visually handicapped people, neither is red. So you are in control, and there's a configuration item where you can control not only when the transition occurs between the colors, but what the color is. There's something called a waterfall, which we're going to go over in a little bit, that you're able to visualize the signals. You can see what the signals look like. There's two controls associated with the waterfall, and one is the reference level, which is, think of that as the gain of the system, and then there's a dynamic range associated with that, how far down you can see. So there's two things. This -10 is basically the reference level, and this one controls how deep in the signal you can look. Fldigi can display the signal in three ways: the waterfall, a fast Fourier transform, or a signal spread, and actually something which looks like a small oscilloscope to look at what the actual signal looks like. Keep in mind that every time you change this by a factor of 6 dB, either one of these, that's effectively a change of gain by 2, and a 20 dB change is a gain of 10. So continue on with the sound card settings. After you've selected the device, you then have to decide a little bit more about how that device is going to perform with Fldigi. Every sound card has a native sample rate. My ICOM 7100 and FT991A are both 44,100 for the sample rate. That's a pretty common sample rate too for most sound card interfaces. But you don't have to worry about that if you select native. If you select native, then Fldigi will work with whatever device you have in its native mode. But, and this is a big but, most of the modems don't work at that mode. PSK, for example, expects to have samples which occur at 8,000 samples per second. That means that the 44100 has to be converted in real time over into an 8,000 sample per second audio stream. That's done using a sample rate converter. This is the best sample rate converter, and it's also the one that is the most costly in terms of the processing power required in a computer. For a very good modern day computer, you can leave it at that. My recommendation is that you start with either slowest or medium sync interpolator at this point. The rest of these have to do with part per million errors on the sound card. Sound card has its own clock oscillator in it, which may not, in fact, be in sync with the remote sound card. So you can adjust that both for receive and transmit. And you can also adjust for transmit offset. Some of the older transceivers, you'll see a difference between receive and transmit frequency due to the various mixing stages. You can compensate for that here. And finally, there is a very finely tuned frequency correction, which only has to do with looking at something called the frequency measurement test, something coming up this month by our good friend out there in Texas. So you want to be able to adjust the signal level. And these are the controls I spoke to you a few minutes ago in terms of the low, normal, and high for that diamond indicator. And this is the input signal level you're going to see. You should expect about between minus 40 and minus 30 dB input signal on a no digital signals, but a normal noisy background on say 40 or 20 meter for the receiver input. This is the one that appears on this configuration panel. This is what it looks like on the main dialog for Fldigi. It'll be down at the very bottom of and in the middle of the screen. And if you click on this with a left click right here, it'll change from this type of a display over into a status indicator, just a textual status indicator, and it's a toggle. You can move back and forth between the two. Again, this is what the normal signals look like on the waterfall. This is a PSK31 idle signal. This is a PSK31 signal with data transfers occurring. So you want to check your input after you've gone through those controls. You want to take a look at the waterfall. It's a visual representation of time as it drops down in this direction. Fldigi's waterfall drops from top to bottom. Some do move in the other direction. Frequency is across horizontally, and amplitude is by color. And so in this, for the color selection I have here, blue is very low amplitude, white is medium amplitudes, and red is high amplitude. You can select what this waterfall palette looks like on one of the configuration panels, in which you can select various panels or even create your own. This happens to be blue 1, this is being shown right here. And it's the one that I prefer most for my visual color acuity. I have a gentleman over in Australia who has made one for me, and it's all green because that's the only color he can see. So transceiver control, I want to talk about that at this point, because without transceiver control, digital communications is difficult to say the least. FLRig is a separate application, and it provides the greatest amount of control over the transceiver. RigCat is a Fldigi user-definable interface, provides a modest amount of control over the transceiver. In fact, it probably provides all of the controls you'd probably ever need for operating the transceiver in digital modes. Hamlib is a public domain library, but its controls are rather limited. It's got about 110 different transceivers it supports, and it only supports a limited subset of the transceiver controls. Lastly, it's possible to control all aspects of Fldigi, including its transceiver interface, from using something called remote procedure calls, XML-RPC, and I know there are at least 2 or 3 different applications out there that also do that. So first of all, FLRig, which is the one that's probably the one that most people will want to use eventually. It's a very simple interface. Once you have FLRig running as the separate process, it's only necessary to enable it and on Fldigi, and immediately after checking this box, the 2 programs should start to communicate with each other over a socket interface. And when you see a change on one, the change will be reflected on the other, and vice versa. FLRig can support currently 85 different transceivers, from ones as old as the 1980s all the way up through most modern day ones. It includes, for example, it can control both of the Zyju transceivers, the G90, was it 5185, I think it is. This is what the FLRig front panel looks like. One form of it. There are several different interface configurations you can use. Some wider than others, some with smaller sliders, one that's even useful for a touchscreen interface. One of the things about FLRig is if you're using that and you're using it to as the controller for Fldigi, it can simultaneously be used as the controller for other third-party applications such as WSJTX. I know the fellow Michael Black who wrote the code to support that, and it uses one of the Hamlib interface calls, and Hamlib, when used on WSJTX, thinks that FLRig is just another transceiver, and therefore it just connects to it. It works very well. I've used it with WSJTX, FLRig, Fldigi, FLWKey, and FLNano all running at the same time, and all communicating concurrently and sharing the data with FLRig. Works very good. However, if you don't want to go to that extreme, you can use RigCat. RigCat has the ability, if the transceiver can support it, to set and read frequency, mode, bandwidth. It can control push-to-talk. It can read the S meter and display it, read SWR and power out when you're in the transmit mode. It can be used to set the power level at the transceiver. It can be used to set and read the notch frequency on the waterfall. These two work also with FLRig, by the way. And you can set and turn the notch on and off right from the waterfall. Makes it very convenient because you simply have to aim your cursor at the signal that you want to notch out, select the right controls, and it's gone. So this is what the this is what the RigCat interface looks like. A little bit more complicated than FLRig because these type of controls you see here would have been set over on the FLRig side. But basically, you have to have available a rig description file. All of these are available on my website and on SourceForge that tells the program how it's going to control the target transceiver, in this instance, the ICOM 7100. So retries, write delay, all of these things are pre-configured for the most part, and you don't really have to worry about this unless you're starting to have problems with being able to communicate with the transceiver. You do have to select what the communications device is. So this one was when it was being used with a Windows system. So the device and the baud rate must be set. Unlike some other programs, FLRig and Fldigi expect that the transceiver is going to be using a fixed baud rate. So you have to set the transceiver up for a fixed baud rate as opposed to auto-detecting the baud rate. And with a ICOM transceiver, you want to make sure that the transceive is off. Otherwise, there'll be a lot of chatter going on the CIB network. So the RigCat definition files that you need are all located on either SourceForge or, and by the way, you select the one you want, copy that file to this folder. If this would be for a Windows system. They're also available on my website. Same thing, you want to copy the file of interest to you. Copy that to that fldigi.files/rigs folder. It can be any place. It's just that's the most convenient because that's where Fldigi is going to look first for it. So the XML file is a readable by human file, but it does use an XML type of structure. So you'll see things like timeout 50/timeout, that related to the timeout that you saw on a configuration page. So each of these things could actually be adjusted in this particular file. And in fact, many operators have contributed XML files for ones which I had not developed myself. So this is a user contributed file many often, and if you open it up, you will find the original author and those persons who have tested the file. So if you have problems, you know who you can run to. Again, the baud rate should match the transceiver, a fixed baud rate in the transceiver, and turn off the CIV transceive in ICOM transceivers. So lastly, you might want to use or try Hamlib. Hamlib library has a large number of transceivers that it can support. It's a modest level of support, so you can't do things like control the notch. You can't read the standing wave ratio or the S meter, but you do have control over frequency, band, mode, and push to talk. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the transmit at this point. So far we've only been considering the audio as a audio source, but we're going to be using the audio also for transmission. And one of the things you want to make sure of is that you don't overdrive that transceiver. Digital modes do not want to have any ALC at the transmitter, with possibly the exception of RTTY. Any ALC at all will equate to distortion in the transmitted signal, and a distorted signal is like having a noisy signal. It actually will reduce the ability to decode the signal rather than to enhance it. So begin is in the lower right-hand corner of the Fldigi main page. There's a small control right below the store and lock control, and it's a TX attenuator. Set that to begin with to -3 dB. Set your output power on the transceiver to what its maximum is. On mine, that's 100 watts. You want to open up the mixer control for the transceiver device and probably reduce that mixer control to some low value. In the upper right-hand corner of Fldigi, there's a tune button. Every mode that's developed by Fldigi has exactly the same peak-to-peak signal. That peak-to-peak signal will be the same as the tune signal, which is a sinusoid. So if you can adjust the tune signal for no ALC, that will guarantee that every other signal will function as it's supposed to and will never overdrive the transmitter. So you want to adjust those mixer controls with -3 dB and the tune signal on for an output power of about 25 watts on a 100 watt transmitter. That will usually ensure that there's no ALC. You can then fine tune that using the Fldigi TX attenuator control. The fine tune is in tenths of a dB and the coarse is in terms of 1 dB. So you can probably get better control with this over the transmitter using this control as opposed to the level control within the OS. My experience is that most OS level controls are very, very quick acting and they're pretty coarse. So this is the one you want to do for fine tuning. So you want to adjust this for 0 ALC or at least the minimum ALC you can to get a clean signal. Then you want to repeat this with some on-air test. Maybe get a hold of your buddy down who you have a normal QSO with a lot of times and ask him to monitor your signal to see what it looks like on his waterfall. So especially with PSK, where you have many signals sometimes occupying a 3 kilohertz bandwidth, you want to be a good neighbor. Remember, you're sharing the spectrum. You don't own that whole 3K. It's being shared with a lot of other signals. These are all very well-behaved signal. The ideal looks like this. And if you overdrive your ALC, everyone that's on this band will know it, and someone might even tell you about it. So you don't want to do that. Try not to overdrive that ALC. Fldigi has the ability to log QSOs, has a very extensive logbook, and it's able to capture data during the course of a QSO for QSO logging. So these are all the various elements that you'd normally be interested in capturing, but it's not all of the elements that's in the logbook. The one that I showed here, for this was county. If you do this pull down, you'll be able to find all the counties in the US, all the counties in Canada. And this is sensitive to keyboard entry. So to get to this point, I entered, once I pulled it down from the keyboard, I entered MI and then B to get the, and E to get the Benzi, or you could simply use the mouse to find it. If you right click in the receive text area, you'll get a pop-up menu item. So you can use that to do a lookup on call. If you've adjusted yourself to be able to go out and do a QRZ or one of the other online web-based callbook lookups, you can transfer the call name, QTH, etc., all of these items up into this area, or you can simply left-click on an item, and if it's not filled in, it would fill in. So if these were all empty and I left-clicked on WN8A, Fldigi's text parsers would look at that and say, oh, that's probably the call, and it would put it up in the call. It's about 90% good on most things. It's almost always 100% on the call, but some other times it may not get them right. So then you just point to an item, do the right click, and do a select. So the full logbook looks like this, and you get to it by using Fldigi's file, logbook, view, and it'll open this dialog. And even this is not showing the full extent because there are more controls on the notes, my station, the contest, CW sweepstakes, and JOTA for very specific type of contesting. Fldigi can interface with EQSL for doing automatic QSL verifications. It can send it automatically. If you download your QSL database, it can be used to verify the local database. Same thing with LOTW. The only difference is LOTW does require that you have the LOTW application TQSL on your computer, whether it be Linux, OS X, which is what this is, or on Windows, because there is no direct interface built into Fldigi. It makes calls out to the TQSL application. So you can have it go in a quiet mode, in which case the interface will send, LOTW will send the information without opening up the dialog, or you can have it so the dialog opens every time you send a new update to LOTW. Most digital programs have the ability to create macros, and macros are easy ways to send various elements of text and or control how the program is behaving. Fldigi has the ability to show 1, 2, or 4 sets of macros at a time. If you show a single line, this button will Rolex you around through the 4, or you can elect to show all 4 at one time. I get confused by all 4 at one time, but I know there are some people, particularly net control operators, that's what they do because they've got a lot of different things they're having to do with the macro definitions. Just as quick one, I have a macro set up here which sends out the RSID, which is a Reed-Solomon identification code. I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. Sends out CQ a few times, my call sign, and then goes from transmit back to receive. The same thing with somebody answering the QSO, and over the final, a little bit of brag on who I am, a little more brag about telling me how old I am. This one actually is a macro to control the transceiver, to actually QSY the transceiver so that the signal I'm receiving will be in the center of the receive passband, and then narrow the passband. This one restores it back to where it was before. So a little bit of example of all you can do. These are all straight text files that are used for all of the macros, but they're more easily configured using the built-in macro editor. So you left click on a button and the macro is executed. You right click on it, and this dialog will be opened up so you can then modify or add a new macro. To talk about Reed-Solomon identifier, something that Patrick Lindecker, the man who writes and maintains multi-PSK, developed. It's a sequence of 15, or in some of Fldgi's modems, 30 tones. It's a code that's very similar to that used by deep space probes. Each mode is uniquely identified by its Reed-Solomon identifier. So if you transmit a Reed-Solomon identifier preceding your actual transmission, another station who is detecting that type of a signal can then automatically decode, change to your mode, maybe even change to your frequency, so that responding to your signal will be much more quickly. So in Fldigi, both the transmit and the receive behavior of RSID is configurable. In the upper right-hand corner of Fldigi, near that tune button, are 2 other buttons, RxID and TXID. Either one can be enabled or disabled from this point, at this spot. If this is enabled with a green light, that usually means that it's only going to look at a very small passband around your current waterfall signal. If this is red, then it will be over the entire passband that the received will be decoded. So you control all of some of this characteristics on the configuration panel for RSID. I'm not going to try to go over all this. It's all in the 600-page manual. Somebody told me that just reading 1 page a day from Fldigi manual will take you 2 years. So you're going to have to make a PDF copy and take it into the head with you. So receive modes, you can control what modes you will detect it on. Actually, there's believe it or not, there's a RSID code for CW. I never use it, but somebody might. There's also one for PSK31, but the default in Fldigi is not to enable that. And I would suggest you leave it that way because most people know what PSK31 looks and sounds like. Same thing on the transmit. You can control which of the various modes will or will not be enabled for RSID. Just a minute, I need a little water. So third-party logging programs includes the N3FJP logger support. Fldigi can connect to the normal logger and any one of N3FJP's contest logbooks. I don't use it normally, although he's been kind enough to give me a copy on every one so I can test them. I'm not a contester. It also supports direct interface on a Mac to the Mac logger for persons who want to use that instead of the Fldigi logbook. So how about some fun features in Fldigi? First of all, Fldigi has a built-in DX cluster support, and you can acquire the frequency and the mode from that cluster report and automatically change Fldigi's frequency mode over to be able to access a particular DX QSO that you're trying to get into. It has something called audio alerts. This was added by special request because some folks said they were missing it when somebody was calling them calling their call sign. So audio alerts allows you to do various things with the audio stream that comes in on Fldigi, and then produce sounds, barks, bells. We'll see that in a minute. And it also has a audio monitor, so that whatever the audio that's being received from the receiver can be sent over to the computer's normal output for sound output, and that could be a set of headphones, for example. That also includes a digital signal processing filter that'll allow you to filter that signal down to as low as 50 hertz. Very, very clean DSP filtering, as good or better than anything you can buy on an aftermarket audio processor. Also includes the ability to participate in and manage a field day event. And the last thing that was added just recently is a new frequency measurement analyzer called FMT. Connie is going to be transmitting as FMT November 11th. If you want to be able to participate in that, you can with this particular decoder. So DX cluster allows you to look at the various reports. A click on one of these would transfer the information over into the applicable mode and frequency for Fldigi, and it would automatically put you on frequency. You can look at the raw telnet stream. You can look at sunspot activities. There's built-in help, and you can also get the help from online from the particular DX cluster that you are connected to. Audio alerts on that same panel you use to connect to decide whether you're going to be connected to port audio, pulse audio, or whatever. At the very bottom, there's the ability to select which device will be used for sharing both audio alerts and the RX monitor, and the ability to enable that. In this case, this is being enabled on a Windows system for the normal Windows sound card. These are the things that you can use for audio alerts. Any regex detected wave. Regex means regular expression. Forget about this until you really know all about Fldigi. These are the simple ones. If you filled out my call in the very beginning on that operator configuration page, you can have it detect whenever your call is received within either the main text, receive text, or on the multi-channel text. And then you can have it play something for you. In this case, it's going to play the dinner bell, which will make you think you're ready for dinner on your cruise liner. But there are many different things you can select. Phone, some external MP3 file, or some external WAV file. So if you don't like the sounds that I've included, you have the vast resources of the internet to select various files to play back. You can select the volume independently for the audio playback, independent of all other playbacks. Associated with that same audio output is the audio monitor. It looks like this when you brought it up. You find it on the View RX Audio Dialog menu item. It looks like this. You can control the volume. This will be independent from the volume for the audio alerts. You can put the monitor on. You can select either filtered or unfiltered audio. You can independently select the bandwidth, the mid, low, and high frequencies. And this works very well. I use it quite a bit. I like my filters in both of my transceivers, but I like to listen to the one on the computer. This is a field day server. It's a separate program, and it can run on any one of the supported operating systems. And it will support any number of clients over the local area network you might have in a field day operation. This is the client, which is also a separate application. This is the client that's built into Fldigi. So Fldigi can be used along with any other type of voice or MIDI or whatever other stations within that field day operation might be supporting. Lastly, this is the frequency measurement test I mentioned. It gives you the ability to measure two frequencies at one time, both frequencies to a millihertz accuracy. You say, how can you do that if the transceiver is not that good? Well, you do it by using a separate reference signal. That's why the dual frequency measurement. In this instance, I'm looking at WWV on 10 megahertz, and I'm also tracking a signal at 10.125, and that's a GPS DO, or a GPS oscillator, which is getting a little tongue-tied here. But anyway, very, very highly accurate. This is a Bodner mini GPS DO with a signal set to be just above WWV. The green line is the GPS DO. The yellow line is the remote WWV signal from Colorado. This is what that looks like over about a 2-hour interval. You can see how stable that green line is. The reason you want both of these is that you're trying to remove the errors that are inherent in the transceiver itself, primarily due to thermal variations. I'm going to show you that in a minute. This is the FT991A over an 11-hour period, tracking WWV on 15 megahertz. And the blue line is the GPS DO, and the variations are due primarily to thermal changes in the transceiver. The pink line is the raw data on WWV, and the yellow is corrected data, where you can use the GPS DO signal to correct the remote signal. Okay, we're almost up to an hour, so you got to tell me when you think I should stop, but I can keep going. Flmsg is a message manager that can generate and store, send and receive, and not necessarily just with Fldigi. There are people using Flmsg just for using it over the internet, or with other ways of sending and receiving digital messages. There are both fixed format messages and the ability to handle custom HTML5 format messages, which means any message that the user can dream up.
You're doing fine, Dave. Go,
okay,
keep it going.
Thank you, Barry. Okay, I may have to stop once in a while to get some water.
Okay.
The Tyro interface is how this thing opens up when you first start it. If the first time you start Flmsg, this is what you're going to see. And it's not very much to look at if you're a communicator, but it is great if you happen to be an American Red Cross nurse. You don't want to see a whole bunch of stuff that tells you about what the various forms are and how you view it. You just want to be able to get in and out real quickly so you can hand a file over, maybe on a thumb drive, to a amateur radio operator, so he or she can make sure it gets out and sent out to its final destination. So in the Tyro interface, you can view a message, you can edit or create a new one. I pressed new, and this is what I have. I only have a few things available. That Tyro operator only has available to it, him or her, those messages that the person who configured the installation allows it for. In the expert interface, a whole lot more things occur, and you get to see things that the Tyro operator would not have. And you can configure so that this would be the normal way that the program would open as well. And you can see there's a very large number of fixed forms, including the blank form, CAP, Civil Air Patrol, the ability to send and receive comma separated value forms, custom forms, various ham forms, the radiogram, which we're gonna look at, various Red Cross forms, although most of those now have been moved over into the custom arena. So this is an example of a free form text, which is a blank form. I happen to like the Wild Rover. It's a group out of Ireland. It's one of the songs that they sing all the time. And so it's a file ready to go. This is a file name. It's ready to be sent using 8PSK 500. It consists of 1,331 bytes, and using this mode, which is a mode, by the way, you'd probably use on VHF, either USB or FM. It'll take 7 seconds to transfer this file. Pretty fast. This is what the ARRL fixed format form looks like. Some things are done automatically, including the word count check, access to the HX and what they mean. So various things that'll help you out. And whether or not you're using a standard format or not, you could go with a non-standard format. Again, this is using Thor 100. That's a good mode for even on 80 meters, because Thor was designed specifically to be used on the LF and low HF bands. So it's 375 bytes, 17 seconds, because all we're transferring in either the last one or this one is the raw data. Nothing that has to do with how the form is viewed. Flmsg only transfers raw data. For example, here's a CSV file which was imported, and I would dare anybody to be able to transfer this information using a voice network in 5 seconds. In fact, I bet you couldn't do it in 5 minutes. Very, very difficult to be able to transfer this type of columnar data that consists of numeric and text, which is not something that most hams are familiar with. This, if you look at this using the view CSV internally, you can look at it. It looks a little bit easier to read here because there's nice. You can see the columnar nature of a CSV file. It could also be viewed on a web interface. This is what it would look like on a web interface. When you see all these nice dots up here, you're looking at a file which was being shown on a Mac OS interface. But it would look identical on Unix, Linux, or Windows. So custom forms are used now for all the American Red Cross Flmsg forms. They're all, I maintain the repository for these. I don't create them. They're being created by people who are either employees of or have a very close association with the American Red Cross. And so these files are all kept up to date, and they are the ones that are the official ARC files for use with Flmsg. Just an example of what you can do with custom forms. I created a little form that was easy to assess damage if you were looking at damage due to a hurricane or perhaps a tornado. And this is the form being entered, and it's the custom form, and it's on a web page interface that you do the entries. You simply select which one of the forms it is. You can look at it, so you know, have a good idea of what major damage is. You submit the form. The only thing that's going to be transmitted is the number 1, 2, 3, or 4. None of the photographs. Okay, so if you're going to use Flmsg with Fldigi, you want to have the two of them interface to each other, because Fldigi can recognize when an FL message is being received, and if the interface is enabled, it will either directly transfer to an executing FL message, or it will open up an FL message so that it will immediately be visible either in FL message and or opening up to view it in a browser. There's a proviso. The message must have been received 100%, no errors. But if you're using the type of digital modems that provide for forward error correcting, you're probably going to have that occur. It's going to work and work well. So I'm going to give you some useful links. You don't have to, don't try writing these down, because you'll be able to get this entire PowerPoint. This is my website. This is where the SourceForge. By the way, all of the source code for every one of these applications is on SourceForge. It's open source. Anybody can take it, modify it, do whatever they want with it. Download for the various files, the executables, that is. The alternate site is on my website. This might be faster at times than SourceForge because I maintain a pretty wide bandwidth. There are 3 user groups associated with Fldigi. For the EMCOM folks, you want to join NBEMS. This groups.io. If you're on Windows, this would be preferable, because you're going to find more people who can assist you. This group has about 4,000 members. This one has almost 7,000, and there's one for Linux and OS X folks. That's up around 3,600. So there's quite a few people out there who can and are willing and able to be Elmers for if you're a newcomer. This is links for online help for the online manuals. The manuals are available both as online web pages and as downloadable PDF documents. And this lecture is available right here. I'm done, Barry.
Okay, good. Dan, you want to start with the questions from the chat, since we have a whole bunch?
You betcha. Hang on here. Let me free myself up. But Dave, okay, you killed your deal. Good. We've got a whole gob here in chat, and no hands are raised here. If you got a question you want to come on the screen, raise your hand by raise your hand button at the bottom. And Barry, before we go any farther, David, are you going to send me your slideshow so I can send it out in PDF with the information on this video?
Anyone you want to give that to is fine.
Okay, fine. Send it to me in email.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Or you can download it from that website.
All right. Well, either way, but I think I got to get this out now. So, yeah, if you can email me, I appreciate it. I don't see hands up. Barry, what do you got there in the question?
Someone wants to know if you support Android Fldigi and Fldigi, because it's also on SourceForge.
Fldigi is not supported on Android. However, there is an application called AND Flmsg. And there's also one, there's 2 applications, but AND Flmsg is an Android application that will support about 98% of Fldigi's modes.
Okay.
And it's written by a fellow over in Australia. fellow named John, VK7ETA. And it's a very nice application. And I have it on my phones and I have it on my Android tablet.
Okay. Someone wants to know why you didn't list packet as one of the most common digital modes. Does Fldigi support packet?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Does Fldigi support packet radio?
Thank you so much for being here.
There's some background noise. I'm going to mute everybody. And then, okay, I'll mute everybody here. Okay, everybody's muted. David, you're going to have to unmute yourself, and so is Barry.
Does Fldigi support packet radio?
No, it does not.
Okay. And someone said, if your rig can link to Bluetooth, you can use your hearing aids for CW. Okay. The presentation will be available for everybody afterwards. Okay. And we sent the digital library so they can listen to what the different digital modes sound like in real life. So that's in the chat. So if anyone is interested in hearing what Olivia sounds like, or some of the other really strange modes, there's a whole library of sounds that you can listen to help train you to listen to what the different modes are. Okay.
Barry?
Yes.
I have that on my website also if they want to. If they go to my website, they'll see something called Sounds and Sites. And it's a link that will take them to a page in which they can select any mode specifically, and they look at the waterfall appearance and hear the sound.
Right. I think that's the link was someone posted for that. So that's an interesting thing to do if you want to hear what the different digital sounds are. Okay, let's see. Go down here. The DRA 50 can be used with Fldigi as the sound modem. Someone said yes. Is that true?
What was the transceiver?
DRA 50, it's a sound card.
I'm not familiar with that offhand.
Okay, so someone said that you can. So let's see, keep going down. I don't want to miss anything. And the different radios are set up differently for the different sound cards, but that's a different presentation from this one. So, is there a way to download the full suite at once, or do you have to download the individual programs?
Individual programs, and if you go to the site, you'll see that there's a setup.exe for Windows. There is a tar.gz, which is a source code file for Linux users. And there's two DMG files, one for pre-10.13 and one for post-10.13.
Okay. Does Fldigi provide enough privacy to speak that when working with the Red Cross or hospital traffic, the patient information is kept private, maintaining the requirements for HIPAA?
There's nothing inherent in Fldigi that does that.
Okay.
I will say that most of those files are transferred, you can elect to compress the files, which means that unless somebody has an FL message system, they're not going to intercept and view it very easily.
Okay.
But the HEPA requirements, that's outside of the realm of the communicator. That's really the realm of the doctor and the recipients to know what they're transmitting,
right,
and handing off to us.
Okay. Someone is having a problem getting all 4 lines of the macro buttons to show up. The checkbox doesn't work for him. I suppose that's going to have to be done offline with somebody to help him with that. Which modems have forward error correction? Or which modes?
Okay, which ones do? QPSK does, Thor does, all of the Olivia modes, the MT63 does, all of those. I have to look at my list again, but I can tell you more easily which ones are not, which you'll be find commonly used. PSK31 does not have forward error, employ forward error correction. Neither does RTTY or CW, obviously. Throb does not. I can tell you which one also. There's a mode which is very interesting, and there's a net going on right now as we speak on 70890.5 that uses Fldigi, and that does not use any forward error correction. That's basically a video mode. And if you look at the list in the if you look at sights and sounds, the specifications for every mode will be in there. So if a person's interested in a specific mode, they can look at that and get the information.
Okay. Someone is having an issue with the spectrum scope. I don't think we're going to be able to help him on here. Since the Red Cross forms left the Red Cross menu and are in the custom menu now, will the Red Cross menu be going away in a subsequent release?
It will when I'm asked to do so by the Red Cross, the representative.
How does the weak signal performance compare between Olivia and JSB call?
What was the other mode?
Olivia and JS8 call.
I can't answer that question. I can tell you that Olivia can go down to about minus 17 dB.
Okay. That seems to be all the questions in the chat. Now we have the hands. I'll let you
We
take it.
certainly do. Ellen, KD8BJD, want to take it away?
Yeah, I just wonder if you could put the link up again for this, where we could download this recording of this.
Okay, when this is all done, I'm going to be sending out an email that will include this video and data and such. So we'll get that. Everybody will get that, be able to download it and get the documentation.
Okay, thank you.
Not a problem, Alan. How about Bill? Into BGR.
Yeah. Good evening. Can you hear me, right?
You sound great.
Okay, fine. I was just like to know, does Fldigi do what's the word? Like video modes? You know what I mean, like slow scan TV, etc.
Okay, that's a good question, Bill. What it does is more like a color fax mode. It doesn't do any of the robot or other wideband video modes. It transfers narrowband video.
Okay, that's
If you want, the best way to see how that works would be for you to monitor one of the AM broadcasts that are performed weekly from a transmitting site in Germany and also down in Florida, in which they transmit various modes that Fldigi can transmit on, including MFSK and the MFSK image transfers.
okay. Thank you very much. I'm familiar with that. The other, I think there's an NBEMS is involved in that too. There's a woman who runs that network.
Correct.
I think she's in Virginia. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for your help.
It also does a very good job receiving nav text, so you can get weather maps very, very well.
Very good. Very good. Good answers. Good questions. Todd, N3 PKJ, you want to give us your question?
Yes, thank you. Dave, I have a 991, and playing around with Fldigi for quite some time and looking at exploring some of the other modes it does. Now, considering I know that you're familiar with the 991, menu 64 and 65, which I know for FT8, I need at 1500 hertz. Does that need to be there or somewhere else for the modes in Fldigi?
Maybe the best thing I could do for that would be to send you an email that has, or I can include it when I send it to Bill. I can send you an email that has all of the information on how my 991A menu systems are set up. Would that help you?
Yeah, no, probably, because what I'm concerned about is like say for Ready, or I can't think off the top of my head right at the moment, so I'm sorry. As in making sure that the center frequencies, or as you reference them in Fldigi, in the sweet spots, that I'm actually transmitting on the frequency that I think I am. So that's where I'm going with this.
What you want to do is to adjust the sweet spot in the transceiver so that it's going to be in the center of the bandwidth if you can do it. On the CW, for example, on my 991A, I have it set up for 600 hertz. That's my CW sweet spot. And so if I go to narrow filters on 991A, it's going to be centered at 600. For all of the digital modes, I have it adjusted to be 1500 hertz. And the bandwidth will adjust around the 1500 hertz point.
All right.
Already, I have it set to 1250, which is the low. You can adjust. I'm not sure about the 991, but the A model, you can adjust whether RIDI will be at 2125 or
Right.
1250. So I usually adjust it down to the low end, primarily because I want to be able, I can hear it better. Hearing aids don't work well at the high end.
Right. All right. Thank you.
All right.
You're welcome.
But
Gary,
the website everyone was looking for is swradiogram.net to get the different modes for the SW radiogram.
did you put that in chat, Barry?
In the chat, yes.
Okay, good. Gary, WA3 SVW, come on board.
Okay, I'm the poor soul with the spectrum scope problem. I just want to show you when I try to bring it up, I get a white screen and I can't alt tab to it. And I'm just wondering if anybody else has a problem or Dave has an insight to it. If anybody else has run across that problem on a Windows 10 machine with version 4.1.15 of Fldigi. Although I had it in the previous version too. I'm just wondering if anybody can't reach that spectrum scope. I just get this white screen and I can't do anything with it. Don't all rush at once.
Okay, no, are you talking about the separate dialog that shows the spectrum?
Yeah, there's a tool in there, spectrum scope, so you can see the trace, of the signals. It's like the
How about if I flip over and share screen for a moment with some live Fldigi? That might help. Can I do that?
Sure. Yeah, the floating scope works fine, but the spectrum scope does not come up. I just get that white screen. But yeah, go ahead. Picture's worth 1,000 words.
Tell us what you're doing, Dave.
It should be under view and then spectrum scope.
Dave's muted.
Trying to set something up.
Unmute him.
He can unmute himself. He's trying to set it up.
I'm not following. I don't understand what he's trying to do.
He's going to try to show a spectrum scope, I think.
Yeah, please stand by and let him go ahead and complete it there.
With Zoom, sometimes when you present certain screens, you don't get the audio. So that's what we might be saying.
Do I have audio now?
You have audio.
Okay, good. All right. So what you're looking at here is basically the same as you look at if you had a spectrum analyzer. So you're looking at the signals that are coming out of the transceiver, the audio signals, frequency versus amplitude. This is a 70 dB range. The upper is 6 dB. This is centered at 1500. And if you looked at what you have here, you'll see the same thing here. Let me go see if I can find some more signals.
Okay, well, my problem is I don't get that. I just get that white screen.
You just get a white screen here?
Would it
And I
be
don't
better
get
if this?
I'm not sure. The only thing I can suggest to you is I might be able, if you have remote login capabilities, I might be able to do a remote login on you and take a look at it. If that's unusual, I don't know.
I don't want to take too much time here. I just wanted to, I mean, I was supposed to get a spectrum analyzer essentially at the bottom underneath the waterfall, right? Well, or where the waterfall would be.
No, you get a separate
Screen.
a separate scope.
Well, the separate screen I get is that white screen, and I can't even alt tab to that. If I do an alt tab to the white screen that I just showed you, nothing happens. I can't switch off of the Fldigi main screen.
I suggest we take this offline and go on with some more questions.
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much time. I just wanted to know if anybody else is having the same trouble or it's just unique to my Windows machine.
Okay. Andy, you want to give us a question?
Well, I have more of a thank you to Dave for doing this great presentation. And Dave, you and I have exchanged emails in the past. You may or may not remember me, but thank you very much for all the work that you and others have done on what I affectionately call the FL family of programs. So thank you very much there, Dave. And Dan, K7REX, I'm gathering that you are representing a group that has hosted Dave tonight, and I'm wondering if you guys have other presentations in the future. How would one find out about that?
Okay. We do 2 presentations a week, Wednesdays and Thursdays. Thursdays is typically aimed at the Aries related things, and Wednesdays is generally for general amateur radio. The time's always the same, and everything's the same, so I changed the password just so and you can join a group. If you'll send me an email, I will get you into a group, K7REX at ARRL.net. We'll do it just fine. And the group is for Aries, and it's SEC-Aries, and we'll put you into that. It's going to be Aries related, but we're talking right now, there's a lot of conversations going on in digital communications and that kind of stuff. And I think you'll find it interesting. There's over 800 people in there right now. It's a pretty lively group. Yeah.
Sounds like it.
Okay. Glad to help you out there. Yeah, not a problem. Okay, Paul.
I was listening to the software radiogram today. He mentions a MFSK 32 wide and a MFSK 64 wide submodes. And I don't see anything in Fldigi that gives me a wide edition. What is that? Do you know?
Yes, I can tell you. Those are experimental modes being developed by a gentleman out on the West Coast. In order to be able to have access to those, you would have to be installing the current alpha versions of Fldigi. You won't find that on the distribution version.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That helps.
You're welcome.
Okay, it probably clears up a lot of questions people had about that. I don't see more hand raised. What do you got there in text there, Barry?
Someone wants to know how to display the signal meter at the bottom of the screen for FLDG.
How do you get it to display? Is that what you want to know?
Signal meter.
Okay, hang on. Let me go back to live, the share screen.
Okay.
Dave, fix your camera. I only see the bottom part of you.
Is that
That's
better?
better.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. If you're running the most current version of FLDigi, you will have this ability to have the VU meter displayed in this area of the screen. This is a status bar that will show various status messages, but it can be toggled with the VU meter. That toggle occurs by just simply left clicking on that area.
Okay.
Was that answer to the question?
I believe it does.
Okay.
And that's all the questions so far in the chat. We've done a pretty good job.
Okay. And David, if you could email me the slideshow or put in the chat you might try to put in the chat, or Barry, you can, his website.
Okay.
So that other people can get to that. But I like to have that in our records if you
Okay.
can send that to me.
I can get it from his website and get it to you.
Okay, that sounds good. David, do you have anything more? It's been an excellent presentation.
Well, thank you. It was fun. It's been about 4 years since I did any presentations to anybody.
Well, you did well. And you asked about the numbers and such. These are presentations. We can handle up to 1,000. We've had some go over 500. Most of them go over 100 and some of them over 200 or 300 people. It depends upon the subject and how popular it is and so forth.
Well, I do want to add one thing. Whenever my time permits, I've been willing to do remote logons to people's computers to get them over humps that they couldn't solve on their own.
Well, maybe we all do that offline because I could get timely. But yeah.
Okay, well, it was fun, and Barry, if you're not able to download that, I will send it to you in email.
Okay, I'll wait for you to send it to me email. It'll probably be easier.
Okay, I'll send it to your email.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for
Dan,
coming.
can I jump in for a second?
Well, yeah, you have been. Go ahead.
Sorry, my name is Dan as well. I want to say hello to really old Dave. Nice to see you, Dave. Victor Echo 9 Delta Alpha November. Dan, K7REX, just confirm your email again. It's at arrl.com.
No, .net or org. I'm a section manager, so you can get me either way. K7REX at arrl.net, N-E-T, or arrl.org.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
No
Dan
problem.
from the backwoods. Dan from the backwoods, it's nice to see your face.
Yeah, it's nice to see you as well, Dave. We've exchanged emails and insults and what have you, and it's all good. I love your program.
All right.
Okay, again, I'm going to invite everybody to join the SEC-Aries Groups IO. These discussions on these digital modes and others goes on there constantly. I don't know if Dave's on there or not, but there's people that can answer your questions there and help you out. So, and I will include that information when I send out the video of this tonight. Okay, is there anybody else? Got questions, answers, comments? Frank, Frank just went away.
I just want to, no question, just want to say hi to Dave and thank him for all the work on the nights that he puts out like 20 alpha versions in about 24 hours. And it really does get used a lot around here during emergencies here on Cape Cod. We use a Psk, and sometimes with winds blowing 90 miles an hour plus, we can send a Motorola programming code plug to 10 EOCs via FLAMP in about 30 seconds. So thanks a lot for that. Saves the day.
You're very welcome, Frank, and it's nice to see you also. I hope that your health is improving.
We're working on it. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. It's Bob, the 3YX. Thanks a lot for the presentation. And thanks for all the effort.
You're welcome.
We got another question, Dan.
Yes, I see that. This is what amateur radio is all about, guys. And Dave is a good example of it. Okay, W1QH, you want to take it away?
Hey, good evening, gentlemen. I'm a little bit confused on the power thing for the radios. I've always been told to limit your power to 50% or so, and yet when Dave was doing the instructions, he said set your radio to full power. Now that seems to contradict things. Or is the power being set by the audio level that's going into the radio to generate the signal? In other words, does the signal generate the 25 watts as opposed to actually setting the transmitter output to 25 watts? I typically set mine to about 30 using Fldigi.
If you have a transceiver that has an independent power output control, and that's going to be true on most of the modern ICOM, Kenwood, and Yaesu transceivers, similar to the 7100 and 991A that I have.
I have a 7300.
7300 is going to be the same way. My suggestion is you set that power output to 100 watts. Then you control the actual output power with the audio level. That will ensure that you're not forcing the transceiver into automatic level control. In other words, if the transceiver is set to, say, 30 watts out, and you're trying to drive it to 25, you're trying to drive it to 75% of its now full power output, and that may in fact force it into ALC. If the transceiver is set to 100 watts and your output's 25 or 30, you're not going to be in the ALC. On both the 7100 and the 991A, I'm able to actually drive to about 45 watts before I start to see any ALC.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very good questions. Okay, anybody else? Well, this has been a good session tonight. Again, I thank you, Dave. Thank you, Barry, for helping us put this together on this tonight. Okay, I want to pull the plug on this. Say 73s, everyone. And see you, what, next week it looks like. Next Wednesday. It's Thursday, so next Wednesday will be another one. So see you guys then, and 73s, everybody.
Hope to see you all on the waterfall.
Hey, Dave, before you go,
yeah,
I've had good luck with an FT818 getting from Connecticut to Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and New Hampshire. So I guess low power works.
That's good.
7-3, W1QH.
73s, everyone.